All right, imagine this. You step outside your house to do a simple chore, something you've probably done 1,000 times before. You tell a friend, hey, I'll be right back, and then you're just gone. For more than 20 years, that's been the baffling mystery of Branson Perry, a young man who literally vanished from his own front yard in a tiny Missouri town.
I mean, really think about that. It's a perfectly normal afternoon. Someone you're with just steps out the door. You figure they'll be back in a minute, right? But what happens when that minute stretches into an hour, into a day, into a lifetime?
You know, this isn't just some hypothetical question. For the family of Branson Perry, it's the heartbreaking reality they have been living with every single day since April 11th, 2001.
So, to even begin to understand how a person can just disappear in broad daylight, we really need to get to know who Branson Perry was.
Branson Perry was just 20 years old, living with his dad, Bob, in Skidmore, Missouri. And if you know anything about Skidmore, it's a small town with a pretty dark history of keeping secrets. Branson himself was a pretty skilled martial artist. He had a black belt in Hapkido, but he also had a heart condition called tachycardia, which basically means his heart could start beating way too fast, dangerously fast. By all accounts, he was just a typical young guy trying to figure out his life.
And that's the absolute core of this mystery. At 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, Branson steps outside to do a tiny chore, and a minute later, he had vanished from the face of the earth.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that critical moment. What exactly was going on at his house right before he disappeared?
The scene was just completely, totally ordinary. Inside, Branson and his friend Jenna were cleaning up the house because his dad was about to get home from the hospital. Outside, there were two other guys working on his dad's car. Branson tells Jenna he's just going to take a pair of jumper cables out to the shed, just a short walk away. He steps out the door, and that was it.
So, in the hours and days that followed, you can imagine, confusion turned into sheer panic. And the initial search was just, well, it was marked by really strange discoveries and a complete lack of answers.
Now, I know what you're thinking. 6 days. Why the delay? Well, Branson's dad was still in the hospital, and he figured his son might have just taken off for a few days to visit friends in Kansas City, something he might do. It was only when nobody had heard from him for almost a week that his parents knew something was seriously wrong and filed a report.
And this is where the first really bizarre clue pops up. When the police first searched the property, those jumper cables he went to put away, they were missing. But then 2 weeks later, they just mysteriously reappear, sitting right inside the shed door. It made absolutely no sense.
Investigators chased down every lead they could. There were rumors he was mixed up in drugs, that he owed someone money, but everyone they questioned passed lie detector tests. They looked into the idea that maybe he just hitchhiked out of town, but that led nowhere. Within just a few months, the trail had gone completely cold. And in a town like Skidmore, a cold trail can stay frozen for a very, very long time.
For 2 whole years, there was nothing. Silence. Then, an arrest in a totally separate, completely bizarre case brought a shocking new name into the investigation. A man who was living a seriously disturbing double life.
So let me introduce you to Jack Wayne Rogers. On the surface, this guy was a pillar of the community, a Presbyterian minister, a Boy Scout leader, but he gets arrested in 2003 for performing a botched illegal gender reassignment surgery in a motel room, and when investigators started digging into this guy, what they found was pure horror. Police found a trove of just awful material. His computer had child pornography on it. They found online posts where, using usernames like Oh Hail Satan, he described torturing and murdering men in stomach-churning detail. And then they found something in his car, a turtle claw necklace, just like one that Branson was known to wear all the time.
But the most chilling thing of all was in his online writings. One post described, in the first person, picking up a blonde male hitchhiker, torturing him, and then burying his body somewhere in the Ozarks. To the police, this didn't sound like a fantasy at all. It sounded like a confession.
Of course, Rogers insisted it was all just fiction, a story he made up. He denied he'd ever even met Branson Perry. But for law enforcement, the parallels were too striking to ignore. Could this respected preacher actually be a sadistic killer?
Now, despite this promising, if completely horrifying lead, no charges were ever filed against Rogers for Branson's disappearance. And for the Perry family, the years of waiting and wondering just turned into decades. Through all of it, one person was just this relentless force for answers. Branson's mom, Rebecca Clino. She fought so hard, for so long, to keep her son's case from being forgotten.
But here's a twist nobody saw coming. After she actually went to Rogers' sentencing for his other crimes, Rebecca's belief started to waver. She told reporters that, in her heart, she no longer believed Rogers was the one who took her son. She was convinced the answer was still back in Skidmore.
So tragically, Rebecca passed away in 2011 after a battle with cancer, never getting the answers she fought so hard for. And in this final, heartbreaking gesture, she was buried right next to an empty gravesite, a plot she had reserved, waiting for her son to come home.
After Rebecca's death, the case went quiet again for years. It really seemed like the secret of what happened to Branson Perry might be buried forever. But then, just recently, a huge development.
In August of 2022, more than 21 years after Branson vanished, the Nottoway County Sheriff made an announcement that, honestly, nobody saw coming. They had officially identified a suspect in the case.
That's right. After 2 decades, after all the theories and all the dead ends and the false leads, it has all been narrowed down to this one person.
And so the mystery just hangs in the air. The police have their suspect, but they say they still need more evidence before they can make an arrest. The key to finally solving this case might still be hidden in that tiny Missouri town. And a family, after more than 20 years of pain, is still waiting, just waiting for the day they can finally bring Branson home.